Now, this is the big question. Are U.S. security concerns legitimate when it comes to Greenland? Well, U.S. President Donald Trump is continuing to assert that the White House must take control of the island or Russia and China will. But should the U.S. really be that worried? We're about to debate that with a panel of guests. Joining us, we have Sofie Allarp. She's an analyst from Denmark, along with geopolitical strategist Velina Tchakarova, and finally, chairman of the Republicans Overseas Israel, Marc Zell. But before all of that, let's take a deeper dive into this story.
Greenland has suddenly become a flashpoint between the United States and Europe after Donald Trump revived the idea that the US should take control of the massive Arctic territory. So why does Washington want Greenland in the first place? From a US perspective, it's about geography and power. Greenland sits at a strategic crossroads between North America, Europe, and the Arctic, right along key routes for missile detection, military surveillance, and Arctic shipping lanes that are becoming more important as ice melts. There's also a resources angle. Greenland holds large deposits of rare earth minerals, uranium, and other materials essential for US industries. As the US looks to reduce reliance on China for critical minerals, Greenland's untapped resources have become increasingly attractive. But the way this push has been framed has caused serious backlash in Europe. Denmark, which has sovereignty over Greenland, has flatly rejected any suggestion the territory is for sale. Greenland's own leaders have echoed that message, stressing self-determination and saying their future will be decided by Greenlanders, not Washington. European leaders have closed ranks behind Denmark, calling US pressure inappropriate and warning that threats, including talk of tariffs, risk damaging transatlantic relations. Several EU governments have emphasized that Greenland is already part of NATO's security framework, arguing there is no security vacuum that justifies US control. So now the questions are growing louder. Is Trump's push to take over the Arctic territory realistic? How are European leaders reacting to the American push? And is Greenland really that important for US security?
Well, that's the question. Is Greenland really that important for U.S. security? We're going to start with a 30-second lightning round. Remember, to each of our guests, you only have 30 seconds to answer this. And Anne, why don't you begin?
Well, it's very difficult, really, to answer this because I'm a Dane. I'm also an analyst, but obviously I'm invested. I have friends on Greenland. We have a third of the Greenlandic population in Denmark, so we are both emotionally, nationally, logically invested in this. The short answer is that the U.S. has full access to the territory of Greenland.
All right.
So there's nothing that the U.S. Does not have right now in terms of access, in terms of business opportunities in Greenland.
Okay, and we're going to have to cut you off first because we have to go to our next guest, but we're going to come back to you and you're going to have more time to give us more of your take. Remember, 30 seconds. Velina, go ahead and tell us what you think. Velina, do you hear us? Okay, let's turn to Marc.
Sorry, my connection is not the best one.
All right, Velina, what is your take? Is Greenland really that important for U.S. security? You have 30 seconds.
The way I see it from a geopolitical point of view is that the United States is framing the problem on Greenland primarily from the security lenses, from the context of global power competition, claiming that at some point of time in the future, the dominant position of Russia has been doing its homework over the last decades. China is trying to create new facts on the ground through the coordination with Russia, mostly in the geo-economic domains, and at some point of time in the future could also try to have military presence again through the coordination with Russia. And this is the framing of United States, but by no means this framing justifies territorial claims and claims on the sovereignty of Greenland.
Okay, Velina, we're going to be coming back to you shortly with more questions. Marc, it's now time for your take. Is Greenland really that important for U.S. security? You have 30 seconds.
I don't think there's any debate, Natasha, that Greenland is important for U.S. security. I mean, that's not the issue that we're looking at today. You look at the melting of the polar caps. You've got the intense weaponization of China and the Chinese Navy. You've got the rare earths issue. You've got a sovereign, Denmark, which has virtually no army and no ability to really control Greenland. Greenland is important. The other thing you need to know is this is nothing new. But we'll talk about that.
All right. Okay. So, now I want to open our debate to longer answers. Feel free to interact with one another. There's no more clock that's going to be ringing. So, our next question is really about the absorbing of Greenland. Is it the only way that the United States can deter China and Russia? Marc, I'm going to turn back to you because you were getting into this.
Yeah, the first thing I want to say, Natasha, is that this is not a new question. The United States tried to buy Greenland in 1867, the same year they bought Alaska from the Russians. They also tried to buy it in 1917. Instead of Greenland, they got the Virgin Islands. In World War II, the United States occupied Greenland because of the Nazi threat. In 1946, Harry Truman tried to buy it again. Donald Trump is simply repeating a longstanding U.S. interest in Greenland. Now, your question is the key question. Does the United States need to assert sovereignty over Greenland in order to protect its national security interests? I think the 1951 treaty between the United States and Denmark gives the United States broad military powers. It was amended in 2004 to give it even broader powers. That's important, but it's not sufficient. And I also think it's important to listen to the wishes of the Greenlanders who are suggesting that they don't want to be under U.S. sovereignty. Okay, there is a way to deal with that, and the way to deal with that is let Greenland become independent of Denmark and let Greenland enter into a compact of association with the United States, just like the Marshall Islands or Palau in the Pacific, also where they're facing a Chinese threat, geopolitical threat. That's the way to do it. That can satisfy the independence desires of the Greenlanders and the American national security interests.
And I want to turn to you on this. Do you think Greenland is better off being a part of the U.S. or Denmark, or should, like Marc said, Greenland pursue becoming its own independent state?
I think our prime minister at one point maybe a little bit fatefully called the notion that an ally could just buy a territory off the Kingdom of Denmark absurd. I think first and foremost, Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders, and that's the point of departure into this debate. They have stated very clearly they have no interest. I think it's about 5% only who have an interest in becoming American. However, the head of government in Greenland just a few days ago stated very, very clearly that the Greenlanders, they want to remain within the Kingdom of Denmark. Now, the good thing here is that the Kingdom of Denmark is a very, very loyal ally to the U.S. The Kingdom of Denmark has afforded the U.S. every access to both the Danish territory, but also the Greenlandic territory. The U.S. can come with any type of military equipment. The Danes are willing to provide cooperation to the U.S. in every way possible. So we find that this entire debate is almost inappropriate. I think that's the point of departure. Now, I want to concede, and I think also our Prime Minister or our Foreign Minister on Fox News recently conceded that there's always some notion of truth. And within the framework that we have constitutionally within the Kingdom of Denmark, the Greenlanders have an option of just withdrawing from from the Kingdom of Denmark and become independent. Of course, in that situation, there's a certain uncertainty as to the alliances, future alliances, etc. And I think we understand that would make the U.S. hesitant in terms of expanding the military presence, and also in terms of just the foreseeability and into future alliances. And I think there are ways to meet each other on those insecurities that the U.S. might have.
Velina, I'd like to turn to you. I asked this question to Marc, but I want to hear your response. And obviously, you are free to comment on what you just heard. Do you think absorbing Greenland is the only way that the U.S. can deter China and Russia? Or are there any other methods through which the White House can reach its goals on that end?
Well, absolutely advise against, actually, the current approach by the Trump administration. I don't think that this is a smart way of doing it. And I think that actually we have had a precedent and we have had a clear case during the first Cold War. If we assume that we are already in a second Cold War between United States on the one hand and China and Russia on the other, and the Arctic is only one of the many, let's say, geographic areas on top of the many fields of global power competition. And I would advise actually to just take what worked well in the past. Clear example, the direct deal, defense deal between Denmark and United States. It's just an upgrade of the last such agreement from 2004 with additional annexes and additional content is more or less enough to actually open the door for any military presence of the United States on Greenland without all this noise that's happening right now, without this escalatory rhetoric, and without actually weakening not only one of the key and most loyal allies, which is Denmark, within the NATO, but basically weakening the whole Euro-Atlantic bloc. Second important point I would actually recommend is to create some sort of northern corridor doctrine, which would be an extension of the Western Hemisphere, because the way how United States looks at the importance of the Arctic, not just Greenland, is as a prolongation of the Western Hemisphere. And right now, there is a very, very strong case where you have actually the most loyal, the strongest, some of the strongest US and NATO allies in the North, which actually have been integrating into the US defense landscape for years, even before, for instance, before the integration of Sweden and Finland into the NATO. They have been already operating on US defense systems and so on and so forth. So basically, second pillar of this Northern Corridor would be the expansion of Northern Arctic kind of block. Think of the AUKUS, remember AUKUS was between Australia, UK and United States. And it was not just about submarines, it was also about defense pact. So something similar can actually happen in the North, where we also include Canada and even UK. And there you go, you have a defense pact, it is within the NATO. And then, of course, Trump likes most are deals.
All right.
And I argue, as a last point, you can just create a Northern Geo-Economic Consortium on the mining of the rare earths, because the rare earths and the raw materials are not only in Greenland. They are everywhere there in the North and can be actually collectively mined and processed.
All right, Marc, I want to turn to you for some final comments before we go out for a commercial break. Is this really only about resources? Is Greenland, in your opinion, strategically important enough to justify a potential conflict between allies? Obviously, we heard from our other two guests about how strong that relationship has been between the United States and Denmark. Is this fight really worth it?
Well, first of all, I don't think there has to be a fight. I think you need to look at the geopolitical realities in the North. You just have a situation where the Canadian Prime Minister went over to China and basically sold the Canada to the Chinese, and what President Trump is trying to do by resurrecting this age-old question about who Greenland should belong to is to raise this issue and to clearly state that this this area, the largest island on the planet, in the Western Hemisphere of all places, under Danish suzerainty for just for a couple hundred years, almost by accident. It wasn't the Danes, by the way, that discovered it, with the Norwegians. Anyway, the President of the United States, like he has done in many other contexts, has raised an issue that nobody has focused on, but now has, because of his attention to this issue, has turned it into a focal point for international discussion. And this means that if with the United States in control of Greenland, okay, through whatever mechanisms we can come up. I'm not talking about buying it from the Danes. That's not. I think that's, first of all, the Greenlanders need to decide whether they're going to be independent, and if they are deciding to be independent, to enter into an association with the United States, so that the United States can prevent China from doing what it's doing every place on every continent on the earth except for Antarctica, and probably soon there too, to come in, spend huge amounts of dollars or yuan and buy their way into acquiring the natural resources of the planet. No way.
All right, Marc. Well, we have to go out for a quick commercial break, but stick with us. We are going to continue with this debate when we get back from that break. This is Global Eye. I'm Natasha Kirtchuk. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon.
The poverty is unimaginable. There are people who are struggling.
This is where she washes the dishes.
If you're ever going to allow your Christian faith to rise and to do something for God's chosen people, now is the time.
This is the home of Velina. She's 96 years old.
This is what she had to eat for today.
She has one pot with water and wheat.
My father was killed by the Nazis, and I was an orphan. I didn't know about God. But now, in the cold, hungry nights, I pray for food to the God I've never known. There are good people that love you.
You see the tears. Scripture says joy can come in the morning, and you can be the reason.
If you will bless these hurting children of Israel, you will receive God's blessing in return. Your urgent gift today of $25 will help rush a survival food box filled with life-saving essentials. If you call right now, your gift's impact will be doubled to help save lives. Call, scan, or go online now.
I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, I don't know how much longer she could have waited for us to come.
I can't even grow my food anymore. What will happen to me? I'm doomed to starve.
Tens of thousands of elderly Holocaust survivors in the former Soviet Union are living in extreme poverty, hungry, and forgotten. But through the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, we can bring them hope.
Eggs. It's my favorite food. May you be blessed.
You say to them, we see you and we're here to help.
If you call right now, your gift's impact will be doubled to help save lives.
We just finished searching all the car that the people evacuated.
When disaster strikes, there's no time to think. Every second, every move can mean the difference between life and death. At United Hatzalah, that's what we train for. This is a mass casualty incident drill, training for emergency scenarios where the wounded outnumber the available responders. It's not real, but this is where lifesavers are made. For a terror attack, a rocket strike, a natural disaster, or a building collapse, we practice and prepare. Because when it's real, there are no second chances. Please help United Hatzalah continue to be prepared to respond in a moment's notice to any scenario, anytime, anywhere.
And we are back on Global. I am Natasha Kirtchuk, and thanks for sticking with us. We are continuing with our debate. Are U.S. security concerns legitimate when it comes to Greenland? Well, U.S. President Donald Trump is continuing to assert that the White House must take control of the island, and European leaders are outraged. Have a listen.
This is not how allies should treat each other. And in that sense, I understand the word blackmail. We have until February 1st to really present a united front, to make it clear that we do not find this acceptable. And we have also stated that as far as we are concerned, the territorial integrity and self-determination of Greenland and Denmark are not up for discussion. But we also believe that the use of trade tariffs in this way is inappropriate and, moreover, unnecessary. So that will be our message.
Well, joining us on the panel, we have Sofie Allarp. She's an analyst from Denmark. We also have geopolitical strategist Velina Tchakarova with us as well. And finally, chairman of the Republicans Overseas Israel, Marc Zell. So let's start with our quick fire round once again. I just want to remind our panelists you have 30 seconds to answer this first question. And from there on out, we have more time to answer each question. So our first question is Europe right? Are Trump's tariffs counterproductive? Marc, why don't you begin?
Look, Donald Trump is a genius. He's used tariffs to change the world economy. The U.S. economy is booming now in large part because of his tariffs. And the idea of using tariffs as a negotiating tool with the Europeans to get control of Greenland is also brilliant. I think it's a fantastic idea. It's a negotiation. And that's fair in international diplomacy. Tariffs are a part of the toolbox.
All right, and you are next. What is your reaction to this question? Is Europe right? Are Trump's tariffs counterproductive?
I think the Americans need to ask themselves what kind of relationship they want with Europe. Europe has been part of the most powerful alliance, defense alliance in history with NATO. And that kind of alliance is built on trust. And that trust has to be nurtured and not, this is not simply the way to do it. And I think the European states are right in saying so to the US.
All right. Velina, what do you have to say to this question?
Trump's tariffs on Europe in this particular case are counterproductive. They could lead to a trade war between two strategic allies, between United States and Europe. They could weaken not only the Euro-Atlantic bonds, but one of the most important strategic allies, if we claim that the United States is preparing and is going to face the dragon bear, the China-Russia coordination on the global arena, this is exactly the way how it should not be done. And also, they could be actually overruled by the US Supreme Court. So in that case, it's also politically not very smart to attack an ally.
Okay, we're now going to open the panelists to a longer debate form here. Every question I ask, you can now take your time, but not too long. You want to make sure we can hear the other voices as well. Obviously, there were some clear divides in the answers that we just got from our panelists. You know, is this infighting between NATO partners and between the U.S. and the EU ultimately going to embolden America's rivals, namely China and Russia, which obviously Trump is concerned about in the first place? Marc, what's your take?
Well, listen, this is a constructive debate among allies within the NATO framework. And one of the things that Donald Trump has done since he's become president, both in the first term and in the second term, is to focus the world's attention, the American public's attention, on the utility of NATO and the strength of this European alliance. That the United States has been picking up the bill for NATO ever since the end of World War II. And has given cover to the Europeans consistently for their protection against aggression from particularly the former Soviet Union, the Russia, China today. This is the reality of the relationship. It's a one-sided, asymmetrical relationship where the United States is picking up the bills and the Europeans are enjoying all the benefits. Now, You can see this in the Ukrainian dispute between the United States and the Europeans, with the situation in the Balkans, with Srpska Republic and so on. This is an important time for the United States to say to the Europeans, okay, you've had a good ride for 75, 80 years. We're going to reset the relationship. You got to pick up your part of the bill, and you've got to recognize that the United States has overweening interests in Greenland. Give it to us, sell it to us, or work it out in terms that we can all live together with.
All right, Velina, I kind of saw you making some faces in response to that. What is your take on this?
First and foremost, we know for a fact that the United States, as one of the superpowers, has won the First Cold War because of its loyal and reliable strategic partners and allies, and of course because of NATO and the Euro-Atlantic bloc. And this is going to be the case in the Second Cold War. The United States cannot project hard power on its own. It needs reliable and solid partners. It needs them in the Arctic, in the north. It needs them along the eastern flank of NATO, which is going to be the new Iron Curtain, to actually contain Russia. And it's going to need such partners also in the Indo-Pacific. So imagine the case that the United States relies on territorial annexation, just similarly as what Putin is doing with Ukraine, and similarly with what Xi Jinping wants to do with Taiwan. That's not going to be the best example to set, not only for allies, but actually for the world, in terms of convincing actually that the United States is a different superpower as compared to the Dragon Bear. So I claim that here, once again, the United States needs its European partners. It needs them in the Arctic. It needs them in the Black Sea. It needs them in the Indo-Pacific. And if it creates this precedent with territorial claims on Greenland, it's going to be a serious strategic hit for the American power projection.
All right. I want to talk about this a little bit more, and I want to hear your take. You know, could imposing these tariffs on NATO allies over Greenland damage, you know, transatlantic relations permanently? In other words, is this going to lead to the end of NATO as we know it?
Well, the tariff issue, I think, is separate. Of course, it's destructive to the trust. We've just managed to make a tariff agreement with the U.S. That the U.S. now imposes new tariffs on top of that. Of course, is not beneficial. There's no way, shape, or form that a weakened NATO alliance is a benefit to the U.S. It's also not a benefit to the Western way of looking at the world, that the Western hemisphere is infighting over territory within the alliance. Of course, that's not going to strengthen the U.S. I also want to just point out that the Danish presence in Greenland goes 1,000 years back. Since during 300 years, we've had the sovereignty over the territory. A third of the Inuit population in Greenland live in Denmark. We are tied together culturally and through history and through families in ways that cannot just be described as a fluke or something haphazard as it's been portrayed here. This is quite serious also to this quite small population on Greenland who have been longing for more self-determination and certainly not longing to be traded as if they were a commodity. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions, but bottom line is that the US has nothing to benefit from weakening NATO and the alliance this way.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have run out of time with our debate, but definitely a lot of interesting insight, and it'll be interesting to see what our viewers think. Make sure to comment when you see cuts from this interview on our social media.